Edward Kidd Jordan. I'm the artistic director of the Satchmo Armstrong Jazz Camp.
Okay. And how long have you been doing that, Mr. Jordan?
I've been doing that for 16 years.
Well, what do you think about that?
Oh, I think it's great. We've had a lot of students that came through. We taught a number of students, and they're out playing all over the world and playing in New Orleans and making money, and they're doing great. It's important because of in the schools, the kids, they learn music in schools, but they don't necessarily learn jazz. And the way they learn it, they don't learn it from a number of professionals that have been playing music for quite a long time. So I think this is important for the children to keep the tradition going and for them to open up new avenues to develop the music more. The more exposure they get to different kinds of music and musicians, then they will be able to probably develop their own music better. Definitely. There's a lot of people who teach in music who've never been on a bandstand. And all of the people that we have in this camp are professional musicians. And a number of universities have people teaching music who have never been on a bandstand, and some of them have never been with real, not only say real professional musicians, but musicians who play different kinds of jazz. Say, for instance, in some locations they only play trad jazz. Some people only play swing music. Some people only play bebop. But I think the thing about it is to try to give the young kids an idea of how all the different music sounds, and let them make a decision as to what they want to do. Well, music fundamentals, you got to have the fundamentals in order to do anything. You may have a lot of thoughts, and if somebody wants you to write a paper, you may have a lot of thoughts, but if you don't know how to get your thoughts and subject and verb and all that to agree and to make some sense, then it's not going to happen. And so the fundamentals are the thing that give the students the ability to play the instruments well and to think about music in a different way. Because we're living in the latter part, well, we're in the 21st century now, and things are just, there's all kinds of new things, new genres and different things. So I think students are supposed to have the ability to be able to do some of the things that this century requires. For instance, there's a lot of great musicians that came from New Orleans, but at the time they had horse and wagon. Automobiles came in with them, and now we got jets and airplanes and all kinds of atomic bombs. So the music has to be as a part of the time. I mean, you can't get everybody to appreciate all kinds of music, but at least we know that we're in the 21st century and we are living in an age with jets and all of that. So the music, you're supposed to have that same kind of thought. I would say a thought process about some of it. But music is like, how can I really explain this? It's like love. I see people hugged up with somebody that I wouldn't be caught dead with. So, it's a taste. You got to have an idea about, like what you want to do. So I believe that a person should have the exposure. You may not like it, but to know that there's different kinds of music exist. For instance, in 20th century music, in classical music, some of the late 20th century composers, Stockhausen and some of them, sound altogether different from Beethoven and Mozart. Beethoven and Mozart had good music, but Stockhausen music is also good. So what I'm saying now, we've had some people in the 20th century that, say, for instance, Sidney Bechet was a very good saxophone player. In fact, Sidney Bechet may have been, he and Louis Armstrong may have been the two best musicians that came out of New Orleans. But then after Sidney Bechet and Louis Armstrong, you had people come up like Charlie Parker and Dizzy Gillespie. And then you had people come up after that like Ornette Coleman and Coltrane. So it's going to keep developing. So what I think that students are supposed to have an idea, have an appreciation. And one thing about old music, if you can go back and learn that, you may develop an appreciation for it. But the new music, you have to study it and sometimes it's a lonely avenue because a lot of people don't want to go your way. I saw people walk out of Coltrane's. The last time I saw Coltrane, they had about 5 or 6 of us in there. And I saw Coltrane one time when they had, in Chicago, they had 4 blocks around, people trying to get in the snow in December. And the last time it was in the summer, and they didn't have but 4 people in there. His music had changed drastically. And now they appreciate Coltrane more now than when he was living, especially late Coltrane. So what I'm saying now, the students have to be exposed to all kinds of music and genres and then make a decision how they want to do it. And in order to do that, you must have some fundamentals. You must have the fundamentals of music down. Because after you get the fundamentals, then you choose what kind of music you want. If you got good fundamentals, you can play classical music, you can play show music, you can play any kind of music. But the number one thing you need is good fundamentals. I mean, knowing music and knowing how to deal with your instrument. And I think the thing that stops people from developing is that they don't have the fundamentals or they don't have the idea of 21st century thought. Because the 21st century classical music, some of it sounds worse than not worse, it sounds stranger than the 20th century jazz music. You know, you listen at it, and Thelonious Monk, I mean, he stopped playing for a long time. His music had got so weird, people didn't want to even listen to him no more. And now everybody goes and say, Thelonious Monk, they got an institute about Monk. And when Monk was living, you could throw a brick in some place where Monk was playing and couldn't hit nobody. I saw Monk on his last time here in New Orleans, and he was the saddest I ever saw somebody. And he was playing with an all-star band, and he said, man, after this gig, it's going to be over with me. And I think they went on tour in Europe, and he came back to New York and stopped playing. Because they wasn't playing the music that he said, the way they were interpreting his music, they wasn't doing his music like he wanted it. I mean, and that let me know that he took a conviction that you got to have some strong conviction if you want to do something. And Ornette Coleman is very popular now, but Ornette, at one time in Baton Rouge, Louisiana, they took Ornette Coleman's horn out of his mouth and broke it up over a fire hydrant in Baton Rouge. Because they said anybody play that bad don't need to be playing music. And now he's one of the top jazzmen in the world. And that was in the 50s. Late 40s or early 50s. So that lets you know how things change. He played the soprano saxophone, the clarinet, and trumpet. He also played trumpet. And the old men said he could play trumpet as well as anybody in his day. Even they say he was a rival. I've heard old men say he was a rival of Louis Armstrong on a trumpet.
Really?
That's right. I've heard the old men say that. And I'm old myself now, so you know how long I've been hearing that. And I know as far as the soprano saxophone, he was the only one who played it until Coltrane picked it up in the 50s and made it popular again. Because the first soprano saxophone I had, I got it from a man who had taken it and made a lamp out of it. That's right, you could give them away. They was giving them away. And I saw the thing at his house, and he said, man, you want that? I said, yeah. I took it and started playing Fatted Fiction and started playing soprano. So they was giving them away, believe me, because they went out of favor. Well, to New Orleans, he's our number one. He's our number one. What? Our number one. Yeah, native son, and dealing with jazz. But he took jazz and brought it all over the world, even the Soviet Union and all the different places that you could go. And at first, he was singing, and I have to say myself, when I first heard Louis Armstrong when I was a kid, I didn't like that gravel sounding voice of his, but because I was listening to some blues singers. I was listening to people like, but whatever, who they were. In my day, they had so many of them. But I was listening to blues, and that sounded better to me than what Louis was doing, because Louis was in that gravel kind of voice. But I grew to appreciate Louis, just like you grow to appreciate any other music. But as far as playing, I mean, you could tell that. I mean, he was playing very good, and they said that he played the high C. You know, people say how Louis played high, and that has changed because they got students now can play the high C that Louis played. But at the time, that's what I said about development. Everything developed. But I think he is probably the strongest advocate that we've had in jazz all over the world. Not only he came from New Orleans, and they had a lot of them old men. Now they tell me, this is another thing, they tell me that a lot of them were on a level, almost on a level with Louis, but he got out and he was the one who was the ambassador who brought the thing. And this happens in music. There's a lot of people in a lot of different kinds of eras that could play as well as others, but they just didn't get the note that other people got. You know, that has happened. You know, it's going to always be one that's going to be above the rest. Like Charlie Parker was above all the rest of them in the saxophones after, say, Sidney Bechet. And Coltrane came out, and he was the best. Ornette Coleman, you know, the ones who get the glory. So there's always going to be somebody who's going to come and do it. But Louis carried the torch, and plus Louis could sing. And people loved the way he sang because they had a lot of people had a, you know, like that gravel voice that he was doing. And I grew to appreciate the gravel voice that he was doing. But at first I was listening to them smooth singers like Billy Eckstine and all them kinds of people. You know, that sounded good to me. Well, I think we've done a very full job as far as dealing with jazz in the schools in New Orleans and the state and almost all over the country, but New Orleans and the state. It looked like a lot of the kids are just going out on the streets and learning how to play the music that they play. And it's a novelty for people to come down here and see them doing this. And I tell them that it's more to the music than what you see the kids doing in the streets, and they're doing it badly. Because a lot of cases, even in the children who's taking music in school, I'm not talking about the teachers, but when they get out on the streets, if they teach them correctly in school, then when you see them in the streets, they're doing everything wrong. So I think there's a very dire need for people to get behind jazz. Say we supposed to be the jazz city of the world. This is where Louis Armstrong and all the people came from. I think jazz, this may be where it died at, as far as I'm concerned. Because a lot of them, if you're only doing one kind of music and not trying to develop the music, say maybe that's not gonna do too much for the development of the music to keep it going. And also, I know we're in an economic kind of problem, but as far as people making a living in New Orleans, if Louis Armstrong was here now, I don't think he would make a living playing music in New Orleans. Because from what I can understand, I don't participate in it, but I understand that the clubs isn't paying people enough to make money, and I know there's a lot of kids that go off to schools and get education, go to different Berkeley and all them different schools, and come back and be playing for tips in the clubs. So that shows me that's a real. I don't understand that one. I can't get with that one at all. So in fact, some of the kids told me they had a band on one of them streets, I don't know, maybe Frenchman Street, and everybody in there had gone to some school, and they were sitting down on the floor with a bucket talking about playing for tips. And I think that's a crime, or some kind of way we're going to have to find a way for the kids to, after they get an education, a music education, to find somewhere to play so they can make a living. And I think that's sacrilegious. You know, I just can't get with it. To try to teach people correctly, to let them try to develop to the point where they can be good, solid musicians, where they can read music, write music, and if they wanted to go to school, to have some grounded in fundamentals where they could go and continue to develop their craft. But how can I say it? The longer we go, sometimes I think, and this goes back to this other point that we were talking about just before, about children not being able to make a living, not be able to do something. And if something don't happen soon, some of us who've been in this business, I've been in this business over 50 years teaching. Some of us who've been in this business that long and don't see any progress, then maybe, maybe we're doing something wrong. Maybe we should get out of it. And I'm serious about that. If it doesn't get any better in New Orleans, because I take, for instance, myself, I don't play in New Orleans at all. Sometimes I play more in Europe, 4 and 5 times more than I play in the States. And as far as playing in New Orleans, I may not ever play here no more. I mean, seriously. So I'm one of them who stayed and tried to do something. Now, I admit that my music may be bizarre, but I used to play in show bands. I've done all kinds of music in New Orleans. That's gone. We don't have shows no more. Where we Broadway shows and stuff, and the union, they messed the union up. Union musicians having trouble. So it's a combination of things that's going to have to be straight in order for us to get it back, and for us to train people, and they have to leave and go somewhere else in order to make a living. And then in the other cities, it's not as rosy as it used to be either. So I don't know, maybe at some point, the children, we just going to have to train them and let them have fun. But when you talk about having fun, now we always have fun with music, but in order to make a living with it, it's a different thing. When I came up, we always had to work and play music on the side. And hopefully, and I've been in it over 50 years, hopefully it's going to be a day when somebody can be a musician and make money in order to support his family and buy a house and do all them other kinds of things without having to, say, teach and play all night or work in the day and have a day job and go out and work at night and so forth. So I don't know, it's just looking grim for me. And for the students that we teaching. Somewhere something is going to have to develop where they can play and make a living. Now, how you do it, I don't know.